call the meeting to order. Jen Lottbach here. I am presiding over the meeting. Alan is out sick. If we could do a roll call, please.
Yes, Donovan.
Here, I think you called me.
Hawkinson. Fortes.
Here.
Lautenbach.
Here.
Littlefoot.
Here.
Lund.
Here.
Do we have executives to do online? Doesn't look like it. And Stewart.
Here.
Roland.
Mm-hmm.
And Darwin. And we have board member Darwin online, looks like.
Yeah, here, sorry.
Thank you.
Very good. Any citizen communication in the room? Not seeing any citizen communication from Zoom. If you would unmute yourself. Not hearing anything?
And just for the record, we did get one written comment that's
Okay.
been distributed to the board.
Thank you. Moving on for that, we'll go to board action. Item 1, consideration of resolution 355-24 for approval of the 2025 budget.
Good morning, everyone. We are asking that the Board of Directors approve the resolution for the 2025 budget. We spent a lot of time talking about how this budget has an investment of our cash reserves to put service out on the street before the demand is necessarily there. So we're thinking differently there with Old Town, the waterfront, and Green Mountain, and then also additional service to Lummi Island and the hospital. The number of the net investment has changed a little bit from last time. So if you recall, we had the property purchase number in there. We have pulled that out because we're still waiting for some guidance from the FTA. And we didn't want to have that presumptive number in there. That will come back at another time with an amendment. There are also a couple other items that will be as part of that amendment. One of them is we have decided, and I'm sorry, I'm going to kind of just jump ahead on it. We will not be purchasing new vehicles for the waterfront service. We're going to use vehicles we have. So that frees up a little over $1 million in grant funds that will go back into our pot. The local funds was about $180,000. And then also for the van pool, we're going to delay some van pool vans. So the cash difference will be about $200,000. And you'll see that come back likely in the January amendment. Since this had been published, we didn't want to try and redo all of this. The budget we've talked about has a lot of opportunities in it, and there's a little bit of risk, but we think those opportunities outweigh the risks. And we've constructed it to spend down the reserves, think differently, and really get expanded service out into our community. And as Jen mentioned last week, or a couple weeks ago, is sitting on that pot of money really is not the best idea that we have. And we want to push some of that out in the community, but also preserve approximately $36 million to start 2026 and spend time looking at our revenue and expense line items and holistically how we can maybe tighten down the budget a little bit to address some of the board's concerns going forward.
Discussion?
Yeah, all right. After all the meetings and whatever, thank you for clarifying a few things, and I caused a lot of consternation in the last week, so I'm going to move approval of the budget as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to move the budget forward as presented.
I have some.
No,
Sorry.
go ahead, Kim.
I was going to say, I also had some concerns about the budget, and I'm very grateful for the WTA staff that met with myself, Mayor Cortez, Councilmember Lillquist, and executives to do an outcome of that conversation and to give more surety about the process, about how we move forward. Was a commitment for staff to provide monthly budget to actual reports for the board. And also, I think we had discussed some sort of quarterly kind of work session approach where staff would be able to share out their work product from both the capital and income strategies. And so I would feel more comfortable voting yes on the budget adoption if we had kind of our process for controls moving forward, an agreement from staff about that process.
Yes. You'll see in the subsequent resolution that we'll talk about setting meetings, a quarterly, longer meeting. So that's where that's captured so that it's on calendars. So yes.
And Mayor Lynn, one other thing we want to do is we provide those quarterly financial reports in the packet. And we've talked about talking with the board about, is that really the information that you want to see? Is it time to revise them? And then also really spending time talking about them rather than having them just be a written report, being able to open up time for discussion about those. And then both the revenue and expense teams are well underway. Revenue expense kicks off in December. So we hope that we're working on our charter with our time points for our goals and our outcomes, and we'll share that with the board also.
Todd?
Thank you.
Yeah, I had concerns about this the last couple times we discussed it. And I appreciate the sentiment of burning down the reserves. Maybe that's not the best way to put it. But I do appreciate the time that Les and Shonda spent meeting with folks, including separately with myself, to get a sense of what capital projects we have that we can dial down or move out if we start getting to the point where that red line is hitting zero in 2029, whether it's the paint booth or the swale approach that you were talking about, Les. That so it's good to know that there are tangible things in there that we can act on, not acting on if it does become problematic. So I'm comfortable supporting it now, and with the discussion of us getting more information going forward regularly.
Yeah, I have a reaction, an observation, and a question. My reaction is I have no problem with board members delaying and asking for more questions. No consternation at all. I feel better. I was prepared to vote yes, but I feel even better about my yes vote now. So thank you to those board members who wanted that extra time to explore. The observation is one I made at the special meeting we had, that we are limited fundamentally by sales tax revenue. I mean, it's an absolute limit on how big WTA can be, and that's the budget we need to live within. If you're a business, you can open up a new line of revenue by making a new product or whatever. We're in one business only, and our revenue model is taxes. That is our business model. So we are fundamentally up against a limit, and I think our job is to maximize service within that. So that's efficiencies and that's better models, but really that's a limiting factor. It's not something we've done wrong, it's just the nature of the beast. That's my observation. My question is a small one. It had to do with the thing you just mentioned, Shonda, about not buying new buses for the waterfront service. I assume that means we're using older vehicles. What is the risk evaluation on using those older vehicles?
I can answer. Okay. Yeah. So what we decided to do is we looked at, and this was going to be covered in the later agenda item, so we can cover it now. So we did a lot of study, and thanks. We had a team that did this. Josh, Andy, John Bender, Eric, Tim, looking at what vehicle we could put into the waterfront service, the new down there. And what's out there, the market's just not really anything good, to be honest with you. It felt like a square peg, round hole kind of analysis, because there's vehicles out there that look sort of like bigger paratransit vehicles. Had one door, which is a problem in an urban environment because people are waiting for others to get off and so forth, and you delay time. So it just wasn't there. We have a 35-foot bus that we can use to do that. We'll wrap it, make it fun, and have a splash, but hold our funds while we see if there's something better that comes out down the road on it. And so we have a vehicle that we can use that is in good shape. The fleet team under Andy's leadership with John does a great job with preventive maintenance, so there's no worries on that. And I don't want to speak for Andy. Make sure
No reliability concerns.
Yeah. So we decided the smarter move, particularly in light of our what we're talking about with the budget and so forth, that spending money on something that doesn't really meet our needs wasn't a prudent thing to do at this point. And so that's why we decided to hold and do what we can, what we have.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, I will call for a vote. We have a motion and a second on resolution 355-24 for approval of 2025 budget. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, the resolution passes. Moving on to D2, consideration of approval of resolution 356, -24, establishing the official place of business and regular meeting schedule for 2025.
Yes. So what you see in here is our normal standard resolution, with the notes that based on discussion with board members, we've added quarterly longer meetings. And then in the August one, a 9 to 3 workshop. Lessons learned. We try to be a learning organization and learn from this year that we should have had more with budget in light of the discussion and so forth. Want to make sure we have a broader, longer conversation, particularly as we head into 26 budgeting. Additionally, what we'll be bringing back in January is a proposed kind of work plan for these. We have service allocation philosophy that we just started kicking off to talk about. Budget, which includes things like the financial tool that Shonda's working on, the revenue teams, the expense teams. So we can have a work plan for those meetings to run by the board to see what you all think on that. So with that, I'll stand by for questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the schedule for 2025.
Motion to approve the resolution setting the regular meeting schedule.
I'll second.
Motion and second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And I'm just going to say thank you, and thank you for committing more time next year. I know we know that takes a lot from you, and you've got many, many other duties, and we just want to say thank you. We appreciate it.
It passes with a hearty thank you. D3, consideration of expenditure authority for general manager for items over 150,000 for 2025.
All right, I'll take this one. So this memo is longer. It has a lot more detail than last year, so we wanted to try to address some of the questions that arose. But we're asking the board to give less authority to approve these expenditures over 150,000. So any contracts and procurements over 150 are coming to the GM for authority. A lot of these are recurring expenses that we know will be over 150, and this allows us to not have to bring each one individually to the board throughout the year. There are 2 here that are highlighted that we are working on right now. They do not have a formal competitive bid, but we are getting 3 quotes before the procurement. So we're asking the board to waive the competitive procurement on these for 2025. We will do our competitive sourcing, and then we'll be working through 2025 to get those formal requirements met. These are both critical parts to our warehouse and our fleet to maintain the fleet. And we are changing our blanket purchase order process this year. So everything hasn't been fixed, and these are things that we're working towards. Without board's approval to waive the competitiveness, we would only be able to spend $150,000 on these parts.
Do you want to talk a little bit about why these are important and kind of sole source kinds of things?
Sure. Nate, would you like to do that for me, please? So Nate's our procurement coordinator. He's online.
Hello, board. Long-time listener, first-time caller. The way I understand our process for Gillig, and I'm not in the warehouse, so if I misspeak here, forgive me. every time we need a part, we're sourcing that from multiple different places. We're looking for the best price, the best ETA, the best freight cost, multiple things, and those things are all being documented on the warehouse level. As you all know, it's important that we have our parts in stock, sitting there ready to go, so we don't have buses out of service. I believe that we are following our procedures and rarely going above that $10,000 mark per purchase, but we spend a lot of money on bus parts. Is there anything specific that I can answer for you?
I guess I want to make sure for the record that we're not just waiving competition to waive competition. We're waiving it because we have all Gillig buses. And so being able to do this, if we didn't do this, we would have to go individually for each one and do a purchase order and a competitive process and so forth. So this allows us to roll it all into one and do it that way, which saves us for BAE, which is on our systems, and Gillig as well. So I wanted to make sure the board was aware of what the reason was for those two in particular.
That's
the other
a
thing
better way to put it. Yes.
No, go ahead, Nate. Sorry.
No, I was just saying that was a much better way to put it. This is not getting around anything so much as limiting sort of administrative time and effort, with the procedure still being there.
And then, is the assumption that we just can only use Gillig parts on Gillig buses?
No.
Yeah. Oh. We can use others, but it's just. Oh, I'm sorry, Nate. Go ahead.
We have multiple sources for parts that we utilize, be it Peterbilt, be it Cummins, for these buses. However, there are times when Gillig is the only source. However, it's not a sole source in general for all of the parts we use.
I'll move we approve the expenditure authority to the general manager for some specific items over 150.
Second.
We have a motion in a couple seconds. Michael?
Yeah, just an observation. I find this actually really useful because it kind of gets into the detail of all the things that are necessary as part of our budget. Could we actually prepare this document or have a draft of it earlier in the budget process? Because one of my problems with city budget, more so than here, is we get a real high level look, like professional services. It's like, what's all in there?
So more of a breakdown of the
And
line items?
this is sort of like, okay, yeah, of course, you need this and you need that, you need this and you need that. It all starts to make sense. Salaries, wages, and benefits, right? Well, this has several things in there that are directly related to that. I find this really, I like getting under the hood a little bit, maybe not the detail. I'm a board member, right? I don't need to get that far into it. But this is a nice level of under the hoodness.
I think we could definitely do that since we have those quarterly board meetings. We're going to have one that will primarily dedicated to budget. So we absolutely could. Miranda put a lot of time into this and literally it really came together at the last minute, but we can certainly work on having it earlier in the year so we can look
or
at
something like this early in the budget process. We can approve this in December.
Sure.
At the final document.
The details behind those big line items, definitely.
Sure. Yeah, that's easy.
I appreciate that. That really would help the conversation too.
Any more discussion on this item? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the expenditure authority from general manager for items over 150,000 for 2025, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Thank you. Consideration of approval of legislative agenda for 2025.
Just for the record on D4, the possible vehicle
Oh,
purchase.
sorry.
Respectfully request to pull that one for the reasons we talked about in the budget. So that's why that one is. I assume there's no objection to.
I obviously knew that, so I skipped it over.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
Legislative agenda. Officer Murray?
Yes. Hello, good morning, everyone. Every year, we just like to come to you and let you know what it is that we are planning to advance or work on with our delegation, both at the state and federal level. And you see that here before you. There's a fair bit of change in both cases, obviously at the federal level, but also at the state level with a new governor and some shaking up at the Washington State Department of Transportation. Let's see, some of the things that we will be keeping our eye on have to do with a bill afoot at the state that may have impacts to our board composition. And at the federal level, two of the things that we've been focused on have to do with rules for property acquisition, as well as eligibility requirements for funding for planning for transit-oriented development. We will be looking for pre-development money for two of our big projects, the Linden Station project, as well as Bellingham Station. Specifically in our state efforts, and then we're also just keeping our eyes open for possible funding support for those projects at the federal level as well. Sorry, I keep bouncing back and forth. And then there is technically no fiscal impact to our legislative agenda, but just thought it would be good to highlight that we have a federal lobbyist already, and the annual cost for that is $60,000 per year. And we're currently interviewing a team to help us with some lobbying at the state level, and the fiscal impact of that will be up to $40,000 per year. Any questions?
I have a question.
Please.
You said something about something affecting the board composition, or maybe I didn't hear that.
Yes, yeah. So last year there was a bill that was recommending that we have, well, there were a couple possibilities. One was to have a member of the disabled community or someone who's is transit dependent as a member of the board, as a permissive bill, so that agencies wouldn't necessarily have to have that, but that it would be possible if that was something that we wanted to do, was to add. And let's see, this year is where we have heard specifically a transit dependent person.
Yeah, there's two. They would add. It's a bill that would add two members to the board, two citizen members. One, well, we'll see what it comes back as, but potentially one transit dependent and maybe one with disabilities. Potentially, we haven't seen what that looks like, but based on last year, so that would make board composition of voting members up to 11, with those two citizen members on that. And that, if that does pass, it's a permissive bill, so we would bring back to the board to discuss if it passes board's feelings on doing that.
Any other questions? Seeing none, is there a motion for approval of the 2025 legislative agenda?
Move to approve.
Scott moved, and I'll take that as a second from Todd. So any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Seeing none, the legislative agenda passes. Thank you. Consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of passing the consent agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, the consent agenda passes. Board reports. The report on distribution of social and health passes for 2025.
Hi. So I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but the board's authorized us since 2006 to distribute 50,000 passes. Looking at usage, we have found over the last few years that the passes are not being utilized as well as we hoped. Just over half of the passes are used at all because they're 6-ride tickets, for just under half of those 6 times 50,000, 300,000 rides. So this year we looked really closely at the agencies that have applied and what that usage is. And so in a good number of cases, those two things weren't matching. And so we wanted to be sure that we weren't oversaturating the kind of the market of free tickets. A lot of agencies are now purchasing or have received grant money to purchase Umo cards with 31-day passes on them. And so we wanted to scale back and try to right size our initial distribution so that we can save some capacity for look at usage over the course of the year. And if people request more passes, we can make sure that those are being used and they're not being wasted. Any questions?
Yeah, Audra, thank you very much for this. I wasn't aware that there was an alternate monthly pass that's grant funded, not funded by us.
It's really come into use this year. We've seen it more this year than ever before.
Okay, well, that's good because it serves the same need. Several times over the last few years, I've spoken with some of these providers and they were running out and they didn't have enough. And I'm thinking about the hot team in particular. Mm-hmm. But my impression is that they would hand them out and they were very valued and appreciated by the recipients, but they didn't necessarily use all 6 rides on them.
Right.
Like that a lot of the inefficiency was that they were used a little bit, but not fully used. Do we track that and do we know that?
57% of the tickets have been used at least once, which is just over half. So a lot of these tickets we just observed from being out in the community. Some are given out, like I'll use the Lighthouse Mission, for example. They have a relationship. There's either some kind of caseworker or they're handed out for a very specific need. And then there's a lot of the tickets that we learned are very low barrier where you can, they're kind of just passed out to people who ask for them. And so that's where we're concerned that there's a high percentage of those tickets that aren't being used at all.
So how many tickets, how many people use all 6?
All 6, pretty low.
Pretty low. Would it be better than to do 4 and then hand out more?
Like a 4-ride ticket?
Yeah, 4-ride ticket instead of a 6, so that more of them would get fully utilized and you could hand out to more people. I don't know your business, but I mean, but if nobody's using all 6, then go to a lower number and pass out more of them.
Right.
Yeah, I think, could you give a little background? Because we used to give out 1 ticket.
Right.
And then with UMO and other things changed. So
we moved to a day pass so that people could ride many times in a day. And then agencies were saying, well, actually, we need someone to maybe come up for a follow-up visit. And so we wanted to spread it over more than one day. I'm not entirely sure where 6 came from.
I think that's what UMO could, that's what Touch Pass could do for us.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it was either 1 ride or 6, right?
Oh.
Or day didn't seem to fit. 1 didn't seem to fit very well either, and that's why we came up with 6.
We could look at changing that. Skagit has a 2-ride ticket that they utilize for specific purposes, and so we can definitely look at that. Thank you.
I just want to get as many out to help those who need. That's the purpose of the program.
Right.
So I think what I tell people in the community about this, everyone is so pleased, like, oh, this is exactly what I want to see my public transit agency do. So I am 100% in support of the program, but I do want to get the most benefit out of it. It may just be that the populations who receive these have difficulties, so we can't expect perfect utilization. So let's not get unrealistic about it, but there are other ways we can tweak it. I like Scott's suggestion, maybe 6 is not the magic number. Do we know, for example, the utilization rate by receiving organization? Can we say Lighthouse Mission, they've got a 90% use ratio?
87%, they're real close.
Okay, there you go. So, and I'm gonna, I'm not picking anybody, but I don't know. No, I can't pick on them. I can't pick on anybody.
Can I jump in here?
I'm sorry.
So, thanks. I guess I appreciate that we know and can quantify that Lighthouse Mission, say, as an organization, has an 87% utilization. But I guess, what is the risk if someone only uses 2 or 3 of a 6-ride card? I mean, if we all share that the value in this program is helping people connect to rides when they need it, but they don't use all of the rides on the pass that's given, what is the material risk or harm in that? If somebody hasn't had full utilization, I guess, what is the point is to connect someone to services or transportation needs, and to meet that need in the moment. If there isn't complete utilization, what is the material harm for WTA?
Well, Kim, it's not so much the harm in my point of view. It's like, if we know that a certain organization has a lower or higher hit rate, we can learn and educate that institution in how to better get benefit out of it. Maybe there's something that Lighthouse is doing that others could learn from. So it isn't that I think we need to like penalize those who have a lower usage rate, but we can examine it and learn from it and maybe improve the community benefit. So that's really more my point.
That's exactly right. I don't think there's any harm in a pass that is not fully utilized. What we're trying to do is get a higher percentage of those passes that are never used. And a lot of what we have seen over the last month is that people are getting passes from many organizations, 4 to 6 sometimes at a time. And the passes are starting to be used as currency for other things besides transit.
Would you go a little more in depth?
Yeah.
So we had some programming issues starting on November 10th with the developer. You may have heard from some of the agencies that the passes started to not work. So we worked through that for about 10 days and found that they weren't fixable. And so what we're doing right now for these last 6 weeks of the year is when people, we're trading them out for these tickets that do work. And it was a lot of a hassle for people in the community, but it also helped us really learn and understand how our passes are being used and where people are getting them from and exactly what they're being used for. And so we, to be perfectly frank, we saw them being used for many things, trading for all kinds
be
of
honest.
things.
Yeah, just say it.
You can imagine that people would trade something for currency for. I've seen
Drugs.
it myself.
Drugs.
Food, other things. And so we want to be sure that these tickets that are being not used at all, which is the other 43% of the tickets that have never had a ride on them, that we are looking at utilization so that they're not just every Friday you can go and get in line and basically get as many tickets as you want, that there's no barrier, very low barrier to it. We want to make sure that these tickets are getting in the hands of people who need transportation.
I appreciate that level of candor, and that very much, that information helps to inform this discussion. Thank you.
Any other questions?
We'll try this smaller amount, see how it goes, and then, but potentially if we go from say 6 rides to 3 rides, we could cast a wider net and get more into the hands of folks within the 300,000, but a wider distribution for folks who may be able to use them more effectively.
I got to ask, what's the street value of one of these things if they're being traded for stuff? Or do we know?
Do we know what the street value of a ticket is?
About 30
A
cents.
cigarette, a small packet of beef jerky. I don't know enough about drugs.
This is fascinating. I never would have thought of this. So.
A donut here and there.
That is true.
Yeah, I really appreciate Audra and the team looking at and deciding, trying to figure out how to right size the program and hold some in reserve so that those that are actually using them can come back and say, hey, I need more. Because what we have seen in the past is where we've given them out, those that are actually using them come back and we don't have any more to give out. Okay. So Audra's team's really trying to figure out what that right balance is. And then also next year, we'll be looking into this program and how can we do it better? What can we learn from others? What are the best practices and so forth? So really putting it under a microscope. And so I really appreciate Audra's leadership on it.
Thanks.
Any other questions? For that? Any other business to bring before the board?
I know it's not board.
Yes.
But if I could, couple things in January, mentioned, we'll bring a work plan back for the board, for a board work plan for as we use these quarterly meetings, and a 2024 recap. Wanted to wait till January because there could be new board members every year. We don't know what the board makeup looks like. And so wanted to talk about the work plan with potentially whoever the board actually is. So wanted to mention that. Again, thank you on the quarterly meetings. Again, really appreciate that. I know it takes more time. And then the last thing is just want to wish everybody happy holidays. Last meeting of the year. Thank you for a wonderful, wonderful year, and look forward to a better 25. Happy holidays.
Kim.
I just wanted to express my appreciation for the workshops. I'm excited. I was kind of a squeaky wheel at one point about having more time to go deeper to do this governance and substantive conversations as a group. And I look forward to the coming year. Thank you to all the WTA staff that work so hard.
I just wanted to pass along, I emailed Les this, but to share with the board as well. I had a meeting with Rhiannon, who's the new executive director of the Max Higbee Center. And we were walking around Camp Horizon and got talking about WTA, and they said how valuable the service is to their clients, and that many of them would not be able to access the services at Max Higbee if they didn't have WTA, and just expressed how kind and considerate and wonderful the drivers that they come into contact with every day are. So just huge thank you to staff for providing that service. Rhiannon also did say she came out of the Washington State Department of Commerce and was traveling in small and medium-sized cities within the state of Washington. And she said, I didn't realize how amazing WTA service was until I got back here after seeing it out of places in Washington State. So again, just thank you everybody for all the work you do to make getting those compliments such a nice thing. So thanks. And seeing nothing else, I will adjourn the meeting.